America.
Lay a big hit and pass a kick the ball. This game is for us all. From Seattle down toward the Keys, this game is you, this game is me. Cats, dogs, and steer, be the tree. This game is America, so sing it loud with me. College football forever. College football forever. Downtown LA, Starkville City. 1 week you're up next, take a dip. Run the rock or let it rip. This game is America. All say, can you sing it with me?
We just stepped on her face with a hobnail moving across her nose. Whoa, Nelly!
College football forever. College football forever. College football forever. College football forever.
College football is a year-round discussion with these two. Here's JC and Morgan. Mike Morgan of ESPN and JC Shurburtt of 24/7 Sports have you covered. Beginning right now.
And a happy Monday. It is 259 if you're scoring at home for JC and Morgan as we opened our doors in 2016 as a seasonal show. We are now year-round, and we are now everywhere. We are on YouTube. We are on Facebook. We are on X. We are on Spotify, iTunes, and Google Play, and we are here for you. He is JC Shurburtt. I am Mike Morgan. Phil Molinax, the Mad Dog, our fearless producer behind the scenes, pulling all the levers, hitting all the switches, and keeping us technically sound. It came and went. Week 9 of college football this season always goes too fast. The next games you will see, believe it or not, will be in November. That makes you feel good and also kind of scared at the same time, because you know what we love so much, what we endear so much, what we cherish so much is that much closer to being over in terms of the regular season. Now, we've got the best college football postseason of all time on the horizon. That's the good news. The bad news is we wish to get to this point. The week 1 or week 0 can't start soon enough. And then before you know it, my goodness, we are already into the month of November. But that being said, JC, there's a lot to rejoice. There's so many good stories going on in college football. I was a little worried about you. And as always, as someone who can truly appreciate both college football and NFL. I mean, from the time I was a kid and old enough to know how to operate a remote control. It was college football on Saturday. And back then, we only had a few games on TV. It's nothing like we have today. Absolutely nothing. There's a whole generation that doesn't understand that you had like 3-4 games on a Saturday and everything else was radio only. You just didn't get the exposure that you do now. And then NFL Sunday, Brent Musburger and the NFL Today, and you would at least have access to highlights of all the games and several. So as I watch your Chicago Bears go down in the most bizarre, I mean, you got a defensive back taunting the crowd, and he's the one that is laid in on the play and taps it up to be caught for a touchdown. Jaden Daniels, the Heisman Trophy winner from last year, perfect throw. It does a great job of buying time, stepping up in the pocket. People exaggerate. It wasn't 80 yards, it wasn't 75. It was about 63 in the air, an absolute missile, and then the catch is made. But so here's where my brain goes. My brain goes from that to, okay, great college football Hail Marys. I grew up on the Doug Flutie. I mean, again, when I was just a kid, I just remember that being replayed and replayed and replayed. We didn't have the type of coverage, but like it was on the Today Show, like Bryant Gumbel is playing that. And then 10 years ago, September 26, 1994, the second best college football Hail Mary that I remember, and that was Cordell to Westbrook in the Big House. Now, that ball was over 70 yards, and I mean, it was a friggin' rope. And what a play. And Keith Jackson had the call and nailed it. So those are the two that I think of in college football that stand out. But nonetheless, with all of that and with your dejected Bears still trying to figure out, you always stay deeper than the deepest. Like this is high school secondary. I can remember my coach saying, deeper than the deepest, deeper than the deepest. There's no excuse a receiver ever gets behind you in that situation. But it did, and your Bears suffered.
It was crazy. Well, it was good coaching on the part of Cliff Kingsbury or whoever decided to do that for the Redskins, because defensive players, the ball wasn't quite, it was like the 1 or the half inch right at the goal line, really.
Right.
It wasn't in the end zone. Well, in that defense, so defensive players are taught to tip it backwards. So Stevenson, despite his antics, and that game was very chippy. I mean, I'm like, when did the Redskins and Bears become chippy? They don't ever play. They haven't been that good. It's a chippy football game. Chippy crowd too. I bet there's about 10,000 Bears fans there. That stadium in DC is huge, or in Maryland is huge for an NFL stadium. So there's always plenty of tickets, and it's a short flight over, and it's a battle, the battle of the top two quarterbacks that were taken in the draft. And so it was a game a lot of people have been looking forward to. Jim Nantz on the call with Tom Terrific. And Tracy Wilson, I guess, is doing that now. So it was beautiful. I mean, beautiful setup. But the defensive players are taught to tip the ball backward, bat it back. Because normally, if you knock it back toward the play, the offensive players are running down the field. A lineman could catch it and run in the end zone. There's 11 guys coming down, right, on the offense. You tip it backward, it usually goes out the back of the end zone, game over. So he did what he was taught to do. The genius of it was, it wasn't like that guy who caught the pass, which I think Noah Brown was who caught it. I think is his name. It wasn't like the guy that caught the pass was just there. It was coached. He was taught to go stand back there. Brilliant, because they know the defensive guys are taught to bat the ball backward. Easy. I mean, that was actually kind of genius, I thought. I mean, obviously you can't do that if the ball's in the end zone, but somebody told that guy, like, look, if it's above a certain depth, you go back in the back. You don't go for the ball. You go back to get a ricochet. And it worked out for the Redskins. I was my wife normally doesn't like to jinx teams. Like, so even if a game's over, sometimes I'll sit there and be like, put this one to bed. And she's like, shut up. You're going to jinx it. Notre Dame could be up by 4. Notre Dame was up by 40 points Saturday. And I mentioned about, this is going to be a big win. Shut up. Don't jinx it. Last night, we're sitting there in the bedroom watching it, and she jinxed it. she's like, what a good win. And I was like, and then something hit me, Mike. I had a premonition or something. I was like, because I'm normally like, yeah, this one's over. And I was like, whoa, just wait a minute. Let's just watch this last play. Because it was that kind of game. And I was like, I don't trust this. I don't call it ESP, call it whatever. I wish I could do that every day and predict things like Signs, like Mel Gibson. I'm like Mel Gibson from Signs. No. And lo and behold, I'm sitting there stunned. I'm like, oh my God, we had cooked some Cajun dirty rice and chicken, and we're having kind of our own little tailgate thing here. And it was a stunner. Now, the bad thing was that what cost the Bears the game ultimately, this was stupid. You have two SEC defensive linemen, including Zach Pickens from South Carolina, who was a high school running back, right? They tried the refrigerator Perry play inside the 3 with a rookie quarterback and a backup center that is less athletic than I am. And they fumbled. And that cost them. I mean, they would have been up 22-12 had they not done that. So that was stupid. It wasn't the best day for the Bears, obviously. Had they won the game, I would have said they probably didn't deserve to win, except their red zone defense was good. But, man, Hail Marys. Other Hail Marys I had down, the Bluegrass Miracle with LSU. You remember that?
Oh, absolutely.
I think it was either Saban's last year or Les Miles' first year. It was Saban. Saban was the coach of LSU then. Kentucky had him beat, and I think it was DeVray Henderson.
DeVray Henderson, yeah.
Was a hell of a player. And then the most recent one I can remember is Felipe Franks.
Oh, against Tennessee.
Florida, Tennessee people like
the one good moment Felipe Franks had as a college quarterback.
Take Florida off this. If I'm a Vol fan, I'm like, look, this was a thing. We considered them a rival back in the 90s, but Spurs, we don't want to play them anymore. I would just be like, we'd rather play Georgia and Alabama because, my God, I mean, even this year, the Gators take them to the wire. Florida beat them last year. But that was an unbelievable day. That was in 2017. I'm sitting there watching it with my Tennessee buddy. We were like, well, the champions of life has finally won a game in the swamp, and things are looking good. And next thing you know, that happens. They go winless in the SEC. Champions of life gets fired. And then usher in the Pruitt era and the McDonald's bags and all that. So that was the beginning of some rotten luck for the Vols. But that was just one of the best throws I've ever. I mean, it left his hands, and I think Brad Ness. No, it was Vern calling it.
Vern,
I think.
Yeah.
I think Vern knew it was a touchdown. I mean, it left his hands, and I was like, that's maybe a touchdown. I didn't even see the receiver yet. But anyway, that's the last one I remember is that Hail Mary at the end to walk that game off. But yeah, the Flutie play will live in infant, and Cordell Stewart will too to Westbrook. That's unbelievable.
The Flutie play won him the Heisman. But without that, Doug Flutie does not win the Heisman at Boston College. Mm-hmm. You know. Speaking of which, I got to tell you, as a Heisman voter, there is a really good chance we're going to see something, quote unquote, different. It starts with Ashton Genty. And I realize he didn't have eye-popping numbers in the win against UNLV, but he's still averaging 9.9 yards a carry. He did have another 100-yard game. He does have 1,376 yards on the ground and 18 touchdowns. And these aren't empty calories because Boise right now has the inside track to the Group 5 slot in the playoff. If they win out, and by the way, Genty ran all over Oregon as well, so he's not just doing it against the Mountain West. And he ran all over Washington State. If they make it to the playoff, so if they win out and they win the Mountain West, and he keeps doing what he's doing, and it's not a great year for quarterback play. The only way a running back or a receiver, like the year that Devontae Smith won it, I always want to say Adams, wrong Devontae. You have to have a year where, quite frankly, the quarterbacks that you thought were going to ball don't quite ball to the level you thought. And for me, like Carson Beck is not having a Heisman year. Jalen Milroe is not having a Heisman year, right? Dylan Gabriel will be in the conversation. There's no question. There's no question he will be. But I don't see a lot of quarterbacks this season having that breakthrough year. I'm a big Nussmeier guy. He threw 3 picks in the loss to A&M.
Yeah.
Even the elite quarterbacks in college football this year, JC, have had some pretty bad games and bad moments, and that opens the door for a guy like Genty.
Well, the SEC teams have been cannibalizing each other. I mean,
100%.
That's a fact. And even Nussmeier, he gets going. He probably had a worse game overall against Ole Miss, 22 for 51. But then against A&M, the turnovers killed them in that game. They would have probably won the football game had he just protected the football. And that's very un-Nussmeier. I mean, Nussmeier's not a quarterback you associate. Neither Carson Beck, with the interceptions this year. Cam Ward, I think, has to still be in the conversation. And I think in 2020 as well, Mike, you had so many teams that just elected to, you had players opted out, but you also had defenses opting out. Keep in mind, the Spencer Rattler hype came from that year at Oklahoma in the Big 12, where they don't play defense anyway, just shredding teams. And he shredded Florida that had half their team missing in the Cotton Bowl. Well, then there you go. No, he's going to win the Heisman. It was a different story when the defenses came back the next year. And I think that season, who were your best guys? Rattler, but he was a redshirt freshman. You had Mac Jones at Alabama that was really, really good. Kyle Trask at Florida had a really, really good year. And like I said about the SEC cannibalizing each other, I think the quarterbacks cannibalized each other. Because, who do you pick out of those? I don't know. Devontae Smith was a freak, though, the whole year. So, yeah, I think that was the choice. But this year, you're right. It's like Jackson Dart isn't tearing it up.
Nope. Neither is Quinn Ewers.
Shurburtt Sanders actually is playing.
Yeah, to Quantrell's point, if Colorado wins out and they win the Big 12, and they don't even attempt to run the ball. Like in a lot of offenses in college, the run game is just like to keep you honest type of thing. They don't even try to keep you honest. They're playing 7-on-7. Now, they have 2 of the best wide receivers in the sport in college football, and they have another guy who is a Heisman candidate who plays corner and wide receiver there. See, I think that's why that would hurt Shador, because I think he is more enticing, if you will. Because we haven't seen a guy like Hunter play that many plays both sides of the ball. Not even Woodson when he won it that year. Charles, he was every now and then as a gimmick, we'll put him on a few plays receiving. He's not doing what Hunter's doing at Colorado.
No, he plays Iron Man football. I would probably give him I forget about him sometimes.
Yeah.
Just because, you're talking numbers. Honest to God, if I were a voter, he'd probably get my vote for that reason if he continues.
They're in the top 25 now. And so this was a blessing for Colorado. Like, they got out of the spotlight. Last year was just so over the top, and people exaggerated like hell and made it sound like there was just this revolution of new football because they wanted so bad for Deion to be the story, and everybody went overboard. And it was a 4-18 that lost 8 in a row. It wasn't that good. What they're doing now is it's more legit, and they're flying under the radar. Now they'll be back on the radar because it's top 25. But they're not stealing pregame shows, and they're not playing for a national title, but they could get into the playoff. And part of the reason is the Big 12. We've talked about this year round. It continues to be the most unpredictable league. Do you realize if you go back to the beginning of the year and the prognostications for the Big 12, remember, Utah had the most first place votes with 20. It's the worst year I can remember under Kyle Whittingham. Utah's not good. Oklahoma State had the second most first place votes. Very disappointing. Kansas had the third most.
Oh,
very disappointing. And Arizona had the fourth most. Again, extremely disappointing. So everything about the Big 12, which we thought would be the most competitive, Well, it's been more than the most competitive. It's been the most outright unpredictable because BYU is 8-0. Nobody had that on their bingo card. Colorado is 6-2, 4-1 in the league. And Arizona State is 5-2, 2-2 in the league. So the Big 12 has been turned completely upside down. So what that could possibly do is pave the way for Colorado. And if Colorado wins the Big 12, and those players that we're talking about, Sanders and Hunter, there's no question they would get a lot of attention for the Heisman. I still think right now it's Genty and Cam Ward, but it's going to be a lot of fun. But my bigger point to that was not just Heisman talk. It's just that the people we thought would have these incredible years at quarterback, a lot of them have had take step back moments in games so far this season. And your point is the most legit one, and that is the SEC does indeed cannibalize itself. There's no – you cannot compare what you're going to see week 1 through week 12 as a Big 12 quarterback or an ACC quarterback or even, dare I say, a Big 10 quarterback and look at it and compare it to what you see week in, week out in the SEC with those defenses and those environments. It's night and day. So it becomes harder and harder now with that league being so stout for a quarterback not to have a blank my pants moment on national TV or a blank my pants game on national TV that everybody's like, oh, I thought he was really good. Well, he's not that good. He just threw 3 picks.
Yeah, but he is that good.
But he is that good, but he's
it's level of competition, right, brother. You know, it's yeah. I mean, in this year, and as I've said before, it's not so much that Texas and Oklahoma have come into the league and they're like where they are as far as like top programs in history of football. Like they didn't come in and be like, we're going to slot just behind Alabama and Georgia and do at least not both of them. Texas is good this year. I don't think that's changed with the close win against Vandy. They've got the athletes to compete in the league and compete with anybody else in the country outside of the league. It's the way the schedules are done now, Mike. I mean, the 2 bye week thing is kind of, some fans don't like it. I don't necessarily like it as far as it relates to just like one team, you know, but I think it's needed. I mean, you know, because you're sitting there like LSU lost to Texas A&M Saturday night, but LSU had to play Ole Miss and then go to Arkansas the 2 weeks prior. A&M had an open date. Who won? You know, it's just like that, and it's insane. I mean, poor Brady Cook got hurt again. You know, you don't think that changed Missouri's trajectory for the rest of the year? Yeah. Mm-hmm. It's physical. You're banged up. You're hurt. And with the way they did it, slotting those 2 teams in, you don't have a stretch where you can go. And then of course, I want to give credit to the Kill Zone. It's a great story at Vanderbilt, but for a lot of teams in the SEC, it's annoying because like they haven't been good in a long time. Right. They only Tennessee when Derek Mason was there had to worry about them. Now you get a blip in the schedule where maybe you go, okay, we got Mississippi State and then we got Vanderbilt and then we got like Maine or somebody and then we got an open date and then we go back and have to play. Because you got to get ready for the Kill Zone, brother. You know, I mean, it's like, I mean, there's no let up. And every week the flow of the games now look like, I've said this before, look like the NFL. Like the way you win is a lot like how you win NFL football games. I hate to say that because I'm a bigger fan of the style of college, but it's crazy. And it is. It's one of those things. And I was on a show last week, and I'm wondering, because of the playoff and the way the playoff sets up, if these teams if that bye may not become more important, you know, because you're sitting, you play a conference championship game, you're still beat up. That's the end of a long journey. You only got 2 weeks off to get ready for the first round. You're probably going to have to travel in most instances. Then you win, and you go, oh, well, it's the 20th of December, so we got Christmas, and then we got to go get ready for the semis in a bowl, and we're playing BYU with a bunch of 26-year-olds, and I got a point on this later in the JC5, that's been resting for a month. Oh, and then we got to turn around and play a semifinal game in a couple of weeks. And then if we're lucky enough to get past that championship, that's tough after going through an entire SEC football season. And it may give an Iowa State, a Miami or Clemson, a BYU, even some of the Big Ten schools, a little bit of an advantage. The SEC teams are deep, but then with the portal, and this is another big picture thing, Mike, Georgia lost 26 players out of the portal last year. Alabama lost 30. They didn't just replace all those guys with depth. So will depth become an issue with some of these power programs because you had guys leaving that no, they weren't starting, but you lose your top two defensive ends, and you got this guy that was fourth that's pretty doggone good, but he's going somewhere he can play. Be nice to have him. Oh no, you're having to play a freshman. In some cases, a walk-on. That's a big drop-off. And so I wonder if it'll end up – Kirby Smart mentioned this the other day. It kind of alluded to how these teams are going to beat each other up. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how it all plays out this year.
I think the college football playoff in some ways will resemble the college basketball tournament in that we love the Cinderellas in college basketball, and if they can somehow get to the Sweet 16, that's a magical, magical story. And once in a blue moon, you'll have a George Mason, you'll have a Butler that gets to the Final Four. But for the most part, that depth that you speak of carries the day, and the big boys are the ones cutting down the nets at the end of the tournament. I think in this case, of course, we're not going to have true Cinderellas. We're not going to have a 16 seed that's going to make it by virtue of winning a conference. But what we will have are teams that are not part of the cabal that are now invited to the party. Where I think they get weeded out is that depth you speak of, that when you get to that second, third game, now it's just too much of a hurdle to get over for them. I could be wrong on that, and part of me hopes I am. But I think that I think that's where the depth is going to really show itself as you get deeper and deeper into the playoff. By the way, Steven mentioned a good one that I cannot forget this. 2013, the prayer of Jordan-Hare, Nick Marshall to Ricardo Lewis, 73 yards. Now, Nick Marshall didn't have it wasn't a 73-yard throw, but it was tipped by the Georgia DB.
Same thing, yeah.
And they caught, and then the guy ran for I don't know how many yards Lewis ran for. So it was almost like a different kind of Hail Mary. It was almost like a I don't know what you would call it, but the prayer of Jordan-Hare works.
I don't think it was a walk-off either, Mike. If I'm not mistaken, Auburn scored and then had to kick off.
Yeah, you're right. I don't think it was a walk-off.
Now, the kick six was a walk-off.
The kick six was absolutely. That's not a Hail Mary, but that's one of the most iconic plays in college football history.
2013 and 2017 for 2 weeks, it was the best. And in 2013, 3 weeks, really, best time to be alive if you're an Auburn fan.
Oh,
think about it. You had the prayer Jordan-Hare, you had the kick six. They whipped Missouri in the championship game and somehow found their way into the Natty because Ohio State lost.
Right.
And then in 17, they had lost 2 games, but they were the best team in college football for 2 weeks. They destroyed Georgia at home and then beat Alabama by 2 touchdowns at home. And those are the 2 teams that played for all the marbles that year. But then they got hurt. They got injured. Their running back got hurt. So without him, it was a different kind of offense because they had that kid that came from Baylor. The last really good quarterback they had, really, I don't remember his name right now. Auburn. This was 2017. And so then they go to the Dome and play Georgia again, and they can't move the ball because they don't have the running back. And then Jared Stidham.
Oh, Stidham, yeah.
The running back, but the running back, didn't have a lot of depth at RB. Georgia schemed them up really well. They were pissed because they had lost. They beat them 28-7. During that time period, somehow Gus Malzahn gets a $38 million buyout because Arkansas was open. They fired Bielema. And so Arkansas is open, and I don't know. It's just
it's nuts.
Auburn. That's a very if I'm Auburn, I'm just sitting there like I'm dreaming of earlier times.
Yeah,
looking back on that.
It not to mention, 3 wins over Saban for Gus before he got the axe. That will go down in history now that he's the GOAT and retired. did it, and not Saban at LSU or Michigan State. Saban at Alabama. That's Saban. When Alabama had it going pretty good. All right. By the way, Michael says I'd like to go to 16 teams because the AQs keep some legit teams out of the playoffs. Well, you're going to get your wish partially, Michael. It's going to be 16 in a couple of years. I don't think they're getting rid of the AQs, however. So it'll be 16, but you'll still have the 5 AQs, and then at that point it would be 11 at-large teams coming your way. All right, we take a break. We'll get to the JC5 on the other side. It's JC and Morgan here on a Manic Monday. Mike here for our friends at MGNA Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MGNA Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MGNA Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MGNA Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Morning, Carl. Usual?
Yeah.
Your oldest was in here the other day. Said the two of you took a trip down to my neck of the woods. How'd that go?
You might as well give me one of those Carolina cars while you're at it.
I knew I liked that one.
Yeah.
There you go, my friend.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl. Congratulations.
See you tomorrow, ready?
You bet.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable. Because this movement is just beginning.
Here's JC and Morgan.
Back, it is JC and Morgan, presented in part by MGNA Wealth. Call Sean and the gang today, mgawealth.com, 954-289-9000, 954-289-9000. Privately owned company, not just your run-of-the-mill stock chain of financial investors. This is a company that's been kind of started mom and pop, and because their results have been so good for people all across the country, they are still going stronger than ever since 1984. Again, they know it's not a one-size-fits-all. They understand the unique challenges that come with managing your wealth. If you want smart ideas, solutions, and sense of security, it's a very important number to call. Tell me you heard about it here on JC and Morgan. MGNA Wealth. Sean is your guy, 954-289-9000. JC is your guy for the JC5. I promise.
It's time for the top topics in the sport. We bring the JC5. Number 1.
All right, Mike. Is it time to worry about the $20 million team at Ohio State?
Can I answer that after the Penn State game?
Absolutely, you mean.
Yeah.
we believe in freedom here on the JC and
We
Morgan.
believe in freedom. That's still alive and well on this show.
Yeah, we have freedom here, man.
We have freedom here. We're all about freedom and the First Amendment, kind of an underrated thing, in case you were wondering if that's a big deal when people are trying to take that away from you. Yeah, I know where you're going with this. Like, they should not have a problem beating Nebraska's brains out, but they do. They should be better at clock management against Oregon, but they're not. You should feel good about that roster and the money figure that you mentioned, not to mention the staff where you poach Chip Kelly from UCLA, a head coach leaving to take a coordinator job. And they are an early favorite, 4-point favorite at Penn State, the biggest game of James Franklin's life. But look, if they win that one on the road, I'm sure they'll do some type of whiteout or something at Penn State, then maybe I'll kind of give them a pass. But for now, yeah, if I'm an Ohio State fan, and I actually know a couple of them, they are not Ryan Day people. I can just tell you, I don't know many Ohio State fans that are like, man, I'm so glad we got the black beard. I'm so glad we got Ryan Day because that dude can flat out coach. Yeah, they are a loss away at Penn State. They are a loss away against Michigan for a fourth straight year. They are an early loss away in a playoff from, I am convinced, you're going to have a ton of people that are saying, get rid of him. He's got to be the problem because we're doing everything else that you need to do to win championships in Columbus. So, yeah, to go back to what we used to do, DEFCON 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, little war games analogy, which I noticed since we started doing it. A lot of other shows have started doing that. We like to set trends here on JC and Morgan. I'd say that they're like on DEFCON 3. You know, you're not on 1. They're still – all their goals are still very much in reach, but they don't look overly impressive to address your question directly.
If Nebraska had a better plan on offense, they would have beaten them.
Yes.
And they screwed up inside the goal line. I've seen that before. But Nebraska's defense played out of their mind. And that's that. I know Nebraska's got ballers. They got dudes on defense this year, although they gave up 56 to Indiana, which is, by the way, that may be the best coach team I've ever seen.
Oh, we're getting there. I didn't know if you had it on the 5 or not.
It's not on the 5. It's not on the 5, but
can't say enough about Signetti.
I'll get there. But they do have ballers on defense, but Ohio State has many, many more ballers. So I don't know. That one, teams sometimes that are really good, even championship winning teams, Mike, they do have the scares. Remember Alabama in 2009 against a ho-hum Tennessee team, Lane Kiffin's team? Remember they needed the blocked Mount Cody to block the field goal, or they would have lost, maybe never played for the national title. So teams do have scares.
Nebraska had them when they they had one of those title years. They had a wide receiver, I believe his name was Chevin Wiggins, kicked the ball up in the air, and another wide receiver caught it. If that play wasn't made, they lose. I
remember that. Was it against Colorado or Missouri? Missouri.
Was it Missouri?
I think it was Missouri because
it wasn't really good at the time.
I remember. I think it was pretty sure it was Missouri because I remember thinking, God, Missouri got killed by the 5th down against Colorado,
right
year, and missed an upset, and then this happens.
Yeah, they went all sand to floor Miyagi kick and got a touchdown. I mean, Florida State, the year they won, they lost to Notre Dame in '93, right? So I mean, there's either scares or flat out losses that title teams have. That's okay. I mean, that's acceptable.
Recently, Clemson lost to Pitt at home in 2016 and won the whole thing. So
yeah.
Anyway.
All right. Number 2.
So who would you rather play in the first round of the playoffs, Mike? Or no, not first round. Who would you rather match up with in the playoff if you're, whatever team? Would you rather play Boise State in the first round at your place? Or would you rather play BYU in the semis?
Ooh, that's
and they're 26-year-olds and they're healthy and rested.
I mean, I'd rather play Boise. I think, like to your point, BYU, there's some grown men. Look, I mentioned this last week. I got burnt by BYU last year. I thought they were going to be really good last year, and I was wrong. So then this year, because we can all be a little petty, I said, nah, I've got no faith in you, BYU. You screwed me last year. So I just ignored them in the Big 12 race. Well, Coach Sataki and that squad, they're getting it done. They've got, you know the story of their quarterback, right? He's Jewish. And ordinarily that's not a story, but it's a Mormon school. I think he's like one Jewish student in the entire enrollment at BYU.
Mm-hmm.
Heck, it's 2024. Anything can happen. But yeah, but no, I mean, they're a great story top to bottom. I've always had an appreciate going all the way back to Lavelle Edwards, who I think, if you want to talk about a Mount Rushmore of innovative passing game coaches, it starts with Lavelle and Spurrier, and then you work your way up. But Lavelle doesn't get credit for all those great passing offenses from McMahon to Steve Young. I mean, Mark Wilson, like they had it going. So I've always had a fondness for BYU, and I think they're a great story this year.
Dare I say Ty Detmer?
You can. Now, Lavelle.
Was he was Ty Detmer
was he still there?
Lavelle Edwards.
Okay, yeah, that was around 1990.
Sure. Yes, somewhere in there.
I don't know if I could have voted for Detmer for the Heisman over the Rocket, but that's a whole other story.
I have to tell you right now, Rocket Ismail was the best player in college football.
He was bad. I wish he didn't take the money and go to Canada and play, but who knows? It's like Herschel Walker. If Herschel didn't spend 3 years in the USFL, what would have Herschel done in the NFL? I think he would have had a Hall of Fame career, but that's neither here nor there. I'd rather play, to answer your question, with all due respect to Ashton Genty, and the Broncos have been a great story. I'd rather play them anywhere than BYU.
Yeah, I agree with you there. By the way, one more note on BYU and Lavelle Edwards. Mike Leach, the Pirate, the father of the air raid, who was his influence? Lavelle Edwards.
Yeah, not surprised. He was so far ahead of his time.
I wouldn't be surprised if the old head ball coach didn't watch
him
a little bit back before he's at Duke. Oh, shoot, this BYU's a good concept.
That Lavelle guy, he's got something going over there.
Shoot, yeah.
Never been to Provo.
3.
All right, now why in the hell is Clemson rated 8 spots ahead of Pitt?
Fair question.
I think it's completely fair, and I'm not. Those of you that know that I'm not being a Clemson hater. I'm just saying I've looked at the results of both teams, and yeah, Clemson's got that Georgia game, but they got waxed. Okay, if you're going to count it, you got to count for what it is, and it's not Clemson's fault. I mean, we thought Florida State, NC State, App State would be a tough stretch. Well, guess what? It's not. Those teams are god awful. Virginia, god awful. Did you see what North Carolina, a team that probably should have quit a long time ago, did to them Saturday? Yeah. Stanford is god awful. Pitt has actually gone on the road, they've beaten 2 Big 12 teams in the non-conference and are undefeated, and just waxed a pretty good Syracuse team. Yet they're 18th in one poll in the coaches. Clemson's 11th, and they're in the media, and then they're 17th in the coaches, but Clemson's 8th. And I'm like, and people are talking about Clemson's the best, could be the best team in the country, could be a top 4 team. And then they're talking about Pitt like they're a nice story. And now they play in a few weeks at Pitt, so we'll find out. I'm not saying
I was going to say
Clemson could very well be much better than Pitt. I'm just saying we don't know enough to know that. I mean, is anybody looking at like who they're playing, who these teams are playing, or are they just looking at scores and that's a pretty score, Mike? That 66 looks awfully pretty.
I'm glad you mentioned this. By the way, Eli Holstein, former Alabama backup. This is the good thing about the portal. Without the portal, Eli might have just sat there and rot on the bench behind Milroe. But with the portal, he goes to Pittsburgh and immediately makes a mammoth impact for Narduzzi and company over there. And Pitt's a great story, to your point. As you were saying this, and I like going into the JC5 fresh. I don't want to know. I want a clear head. I want you to take me to a part of the universe that I'm not expecting, and then I like to go on the spot. It's like going into a movie without seeing a everybody tell you part of the plot. No, I don't want
for those that don't know, unless there's something Mike needs to read, like an article or something, where if I hit him with it, he'd just be completely blindsided. Then I don't tell him what's coming.
Doesn't tell. Yes, I'm completely. It's like that invaluable piece of paper that has a JC5 on it. It's hermetically sealed. It's surrounded by armed guards 24/7. Nobody gets to see a peek. It comes out fresh like deli meat. It's fantastic. I will tell you that as you were saying that, and this is full disclosure, I'm going to be honest with the American public with this statement. If you noticed, when we go through all the myriad of things that JC and I discuss every week, and we'll get to like, for example, the Group John 5 later. We talked to Heisman earlier. We talked about the big games. We never talk about the polls. And I will be honest with you, JC, I don't even look. I could not tell you. I mean, I have an idea who number one is and one. I don't look at the AP and the coaches' polls. The only poll I'll pay mild attention to is the playoff poll, which, if I'm not mistaken, is on election night next Tuesday, the first one, right?
How about that? Yeah,
that's a heck of a way to bring in a poll. So as you were saying that, and you were saying Clemson, how many spots ahead of Pitt? I didn't even know. I had no idea because I did not take a glance. I have read a ton of things this morning and yesterday on college football. I didn't even look at the polls because I just don't care, because they're not relevant. They don't mean anything. And to answer your question, why is because Clemson started ahead of Pitt and because Clemson's been a bigger brand. I mean, that's the answer. These people voting for the polls, they didn't do like a deep dive on Pitt versus Clemson and how they stack up, and they don't know. They don't care. They just fill it out 1 through 25. So that's my answer.
Number 4.
All right, so haven't been a lot of coaching change talk. My theory is that despite fans getting really upset and mad about everything, the head coaches are probably going to be more safe than they normally are. I think there'll be some coordinator change, some sacrificial lambs, so to speak.
You know what I call that? The get out of jail free card.
The get out of jail free card. I can see it. It's already happening. I mean, people ask, is Brent Venables on the hot seat? Number one, it would be really Joe Castiglione's a good AD. Their leadership there, Oklahoma's fan base is rabid, but they're not going to fire that guy. Okay.
No.
Because it's obvious to anybody, or I don't think they're going to fire that guy. Anything can happen these days, right? But I should never speak in absolutes.
If big money insists on it, then we know that
big money insists, but
99%.
That's just not their style. No. I can't see them doing it. Now, if he screws around next year, but he's recruited well. I've said before, the hardest thing at Oklahoma to get them ready for the SEC was the defense. And that defense is still humming right along. They played really good against Ole Miss. Probably need to talk about the Ole Miss offense at some point, but they played their normally good game, held them down yard. I mean, played really well. That's an SEC level defense. Offense stinks, but man, you could rebuild an offense at Oklahoma pretty easy. Every coordinator's going to line up to take that job. You can go get players in the portal. Nobody's talking about the fact that receivers aren't healthy. They're missing guys. They're not getting rid of Brent Venables.
Can't block anybody.
They lost 5 offensive lines all summer.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know if you could just go assume that you can go in the portal and piece this like 3, maybe 5, including a really good player that walked out the door to go to Missouri. He's from Missouri, so he went home. But I mean, that dude was all SEC type. So there's no way. There's no way that was happening. So anyway, beyond Venables, I don't think he's going to get fired, but we're starting to see kind of a hot seat picture emerge. And the reason I don't think a lot of people are getting fired, head coaches, is because the buyouts are insane. Number one. And I don't think I think schools are going to stop with this mess. But number two, that 22 to 25 million a year in revenue that you got to pay out the players is coming.
Yep.
So they don't have the money. I mean, I don't care how rich they are. I mean, I guess you can get boosters together like at Florida. They got a slush fund or whatever. But these 40 million, I mean, it's 44 million here, 50 million there. It ain't like 4 million like it used to be. But I'm sensing a hot seat happening in Lexington, Kentucky, and in Tallahassee, to be honest with you, Mike. I mean, I think it would be probably like an unprecedented fall from grace. That buyout's ridiculous. I'm 98% sure they don't have they're not going to spend the money to get rid of Norville. I think there'll be a reckoning on the staff. But, man, coaches just don't survive this type of season anymore like he's having. And Mark Stoops was already shaky. Now he's lost to Vandy at home and a bad Auburn team at home back-to-back. All the goodwill from playing Georgia close and beating Ole Miss is gone. Your thoughts about those two situations?
Well, you mentioned the buyout, first of all, for Norville, which I think is like 65. It's insane. I mean, how many millions have they spent in litigation trying to get out of their own conference? He's not going anywhere. Not now. Now, I have a harder he was 13-0 last year before his quarterback went down. And you want to fire him now? When I say you, I mean the collective Seminole Nation. Everything was great. I told you I went to a golf tournament back in August, and one of the sponsors was the FSU Alumni Association. And, their radio announcer goes up there, and we're going to be better than last year. And, the typical just kind of rah-rah stuff. And, I mean, there was nobody that was unhappy with Mike Norville that day. There's nobody was unhappy with Mike Norville in the offseason. They were celebrating back-to-back successful campaigns, which Florida State, quite frankly, hadn't had in a while. So they have become, in a lot of ways, a portal program, like Ole Miss has become a portal program. Well, you live by the portal and you die by the portal. They struck gold with the portal the previous couple of years. You looked at almost every one of their marquee players was a portal guy in Tallahassee. And now the portal did not work out. And oh, by the way, they wanted Cam Ward like everybody else did. Miami, they were the highest bidder, and they got him. How many coaches would be feeling better about life if they had gotten Cam Ward? But they didn't. I just don't think – I mean, Norville has to turn it around next year. Don't get me wrong. And there's always going to be a section of your fan base anytime you have a disastrous year, an embarrassing year like Florida State's had. But I don't think that seat is hot this year. A year from now when we have this conversation, it could be scalding hot, but I just don't think it's that hot this year. Stoops, yeah.
Oh, no, sorry. I interrupted. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Did you have something on Norville?
I just wanted to add on Norville. I think he will clean house. I think there'll be a bunch of assistant coaching.
Well, yeah, again, to get out of jail free card. Like, if it's not working, it can't be your fault. You got to start firing coordinators and assistant coaches. And sometimes that works. Sometimes you just made bad hires. Sometimes you hired bad coordinators, and firing them helps the cause. In the case of Kentucky, speaking of firing coordinators or losing they're on their fourth offensive coordinator in 4 years. The offense still looks stale. And all of a sudden, this is what would be concerning to me if I'm a Kentucky fan. The defense, which we know they invested a lot in and looked awfully good in a number of games this year, how do you explain they're playing that bad now? You're up 10-0 against Auburn in an offense that hasn't done much of anything all year, and then you let a dude just gash you and ground and pound all over, and you let Thorne look halfway decent, and you lose that game at home. Like, that to me, that speaks, that reeks of what you're buying. What are some of those players buying right now?
There's no question, and it comes on the heels of Jaden Ball. What's his name? Jaden Ball in the Swamp. For Florida,
for
somebody we've never heard of, just running off.
The freshman.
Florida and Auburn, Billy Napier and Hugh Freeze, they're kind of different styles of offenses, but they're both head coaches that call plays. If you're not going to stop them from running the football, they are just going to run all over you. I mean, that's kind of like most good play callers. That's just what they're going to do. And 278 yards. I mean, Hunter's a good back. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But man, that is a lot at home. You're at home, Mike.
Yeah, and you got Walker, who's again a first-round defensive tackle. He's supposed to plug those holes. You plucked a couple of transfers from Georgia to help that defense be stout. I just don't know how all of a sudden the defense goes south. I didn't have a ton of faith in the offense, but then you add, it was obvious Stoops was entertaining, if not going after, the A&M job. That you don't forget that as a fan.
As a South Carolina person, I remember in the 90s, Bobby Crimmins went to South Carolina and then came back.
Right.
It was in 1994. He had one trip. Before that, he had taken Tech to the NCAA tournament like a bunch, had a Final Four. After that point, he had one trip to the NCAA tournament the last 7 years and ended up resigning because he wasn't winning. And I'm trying to think of other similar situations, but
Petrino,
yeah. I mean, he ended up kind of taking a lifeline and going to Falcons but it was starting to slip.
He was playing footsies with Auburn.
Yeah, and playing footsies with Auburn and got caught with it. I mean, there's just, hey, maybe Mike Norville, maybe he was going to get the Alabama job. I don't know. I think Alabama's probably going, you know. I still think Mike Norvell's a good coach. Bad situation. But, yeah, Craiger in the chat box, thanks for joining us, Craig, says Stoops has lost the team. That's what you see is when you have a good defense that's normally really good against the run. Right. They just stop.
My point.
Because running the ball is about will in many ways, and they just don't have it. So I could see Stoops if it's gone bad, it's gone bad. I could see them moving on. His buyout's not as terrible as
Norvell,
some other ones, and I think that he could also have a soft landing. You know, again, if I'm Iowa, I'm ignoring this year at Kentucky and hiring him if he wants to come. I mean, I think that's a perfect job for him.
I'll say one last thing on this, and I know we got to get to 5 and get to break, but one of the terms, eventually we'll have our glossary, our JC and Morgan glossary on the website. One of the terms I like to use is volcano programs, like programs that so many resources, so many things, tradition, what have you, that even when they're down, eventually they're going to erupt again. That lava is percolating under the surface, and eventually it's going to blow. That can also work in the reverse. I might have to come up with a new term. Because what Stoops was doing with Kentucky with 2 10-win seasons in 4 years, he was breaking all kinds of historical records in the history of Kentucky football. But it's still Kentucky football. And I'm very familiar with the culture there. I married a Kentucky girl, the whole family, lifelong Kentucky fans. This is not they just care about basketball. That's the stupidest, most ignorant thing to say. If you say that, you don't know any better. You haven't been to Lexington very long. They love football. Most fans are capable. You can actually love 2 sports. Like your brain is large enough where you can actually be passionate about 2 different sports. And they love their college football. That was where the Bear kind of became his, got it all started. Cut his teeth.
It's a point of contention around there.
Oh,
too,
sure it is. Sure.
They say that Adolph Rupp didn't.
Yes. And that's probably true. That's probably true.
Yeah, they just really, they've been good at basketball, Mike. I mean, any other school in the SEC, if they were like much better at winning national championships in one sport and just ho-hum in another, it's not like they wouldn't show up, but they would. So I get it.
So
continue.
Where I was going with that is that they absolutely are. They love football. They're passionate about football. But when I'm there and I hear people talk about Kentucky football, it's not just the losses. It's the way they lose. It's the bland offense. They want a little bit of a spark. Like, that's why Hal Mumme was brought in there years ago. I know Hal got in trouble, but he brought an exciting brand of football, and they were lighting up scoreboard. Tim Couch and the hefty lefty, and they were just fun, and the fans kind of dug it. I don't know if they're digging what they've seen Kentucky's offense do now for an extended period of time, so that's a little bit problematic. All right, number 5. Oh, go ahead.
Number 5.
All right, speaking of bland styles of football and ball coaches and excitement, so on another show we're on, and this wasn't our term, this was like our host's term, In the SEC says you have blue bloods and blue collars. But I think that's good to describe all the programs in the SEC. Vandy, I don't know, maybe that's a white collar crime program. Like you say crime because they're like hacking into you with the kill zone, and stealing all your dough. But most Mississippi State, South Carolina, they're all blue collar programs, right? I think I'm going to admit this about Texas A&M. They are a blue collar program, whether they want to believe it or not. And lo and behold, now that they have a blue collar coach, they are ridiculously hard to beat. I don't think they're a dominant team. All those recruiting classes, most of it's gone, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, they backfilled through the portal. They're always going to have talent because they recruit Texas, but this isn't close to the roster that we thought it was going to be when Jimbo signed all those guys. Most of them are at other schools, right? Some of them aren't playing and don't deserve to play. But nevertheless, I digress. They got a lot of tough kids. They have a really good D-line and a lot of guys that'll hit you. They're resourceful and opportunistic, and they battle for 4 quarters. What say you about maybe especially with Texas in the league now, maybe the key to winning at Texas A&M is embracing the blue-collar identity and just out-toughing people. And Elko mentioned something about it. We're a real program. That's what he means after that game because they're that
was a shot, by the way. That was a shot.
You think it was a shot at Jimbo?
Well, he even said, I'm not some fast-talking – when you think fast-talking, what coach do you
I
think
Jimbo
of?
Fisher.
Jimbo's like the FedEx guy. It's got to be there overnight.
Call him a politician.
I thought that was a shot fired, which I don't even know if that was really necessary. It's like, you don't need to take a shot at the guy.
But Elko's a fiery guy, but they're a blue collar outfit, right? Yes. All of a sudden, and look at them, they're undefeated in the SEC. Now their schedule's been beneficial. I don't know how. I think LSU they turned it over and couldn't run the football. You're not going to win anywhere doing that. But they're for real, like as far as could win the league. And they're only going to get better because this is a transitional roster he's dealing with. Your thoughts about the Aggies embracing their new blue-collar self?
I think it's what they needed. Going back to my brain just went numb on the former Houston coach.
Kevin Sumlin.
Kevin Sumlin got that job with an offense that was, Case Keenum broke every NCAA passing record, and they had all these little receivers catching balls everywhere. It was a finesse offense, and they were kind of a finesse team. And then he got Manziel, which obviously was just out of this world good in college before his knuckleheadness stopped him from being a good pro. But in the long term, it didn't work. When Manziel left, it was like, okay, now what? And it didn't work. And then Jimbo came in, and he was the next offensive genius, and it didn't work. And Elko is the antithesis of both of those. And the fact that he never gets that job if he hadn't already been there. That was just enough of a tie to the school that said, yeah, not only has he done a great job at Duke, not only is an elite coordinator, but he's actually been here before, and we liked him when he was here. That made that hire justifiable. There are a lot of A&M fans that thought that that's not a big enough name, if we're being honest. That hire was not met with tremendous approval from Aggie Nation, but now it is. They're the best running team in the SEC. I'm not even sure if it's that close. They will, and I've mentioned Le'Veon Moss's name on this show. It was Amari Daniels who was unbelievable, and then Marcel Reed, who came in the game for Connor Wigman. And I know we have a number of Gamecock fans that listen to this show as well. This is going to be your key. I don't worry about A&M throwing that much. The matchup of the game to me will be, can A&M gash that elite Gamecock defense on the ground? Marcel Reed came in the game, and he is exciting. I mean, he's a lightning bolt. He completed 2 passes. He was 2 for 2 for 70 yards. Everybody in the stadium knew that they were running on virtually every play when he came in the game. It didn't matter. You couldn't stop it. LSU could not stop it. And Carolina's a much better defense, which makes this, to me, a better matchup from that standpoint. But, yeah, their defense is stout and their ground game is elite. And that's kind of, some would say, old school football. And that is Mike Elko to a T.
Yeah, they haven't played a defense as good as South Carolina since Notre Dame. But South Carolina has not played a team that wants to line up and gash you either. You know, right. Kentucky maybe, but weirdly enough, Kentucky got away from that. I mean, they were actually having success against the Gamecocks running the ball, and they got away from it. LSU was sort of you saw what LSU was trying to do running the ball Saturday night. They did it okay. They did it well against the Gamecocks after – but LSU's a passing football team. Mississippi State has no defense. Arkansas's defense is helter-skelter. And then LSU. Those are the 4 teams they played. They almost lost to Bowling Green. My point is none of that matters because what he's doing is they're not a team that you're worried about coming in and blowing you out necessarily. You're just not going to win. Especially if you turn it over 3 times. I mean, you're just not going to win. And I loved Marcel. Marcel Reed has been really – I mean, he led them to the win at Florida. I mean, they won it. They won at Florida, and they just put – I was surprised because we were talking about Weigman. Remember on the show, we were like, we don't know that Weigman's coming. It's like the end of Point Break. He's not coming back. Well, I didn't think Weigman was coming back. Lo and behold, he does and lights Missouri on fire. Now we find out Missouri's just not a very good football team. Yeah, it's weird. We'll see what happens Saturday night, but I think that's a heck of a matchup. And I start hearing people talk, though, and if you're an Aggie, you can tell these people to shut up. You start talking, they've got a clear path to the SEC championship game. Until they play Texas, they don't play anybody.
Be careful.
I just mentioned the teams they have played. South Carolina's defense is better. And do not, Aggie fans. You're Aggies. Remember this. You've had some history that we can all relate to. Those of us that aren't Alabama fans. Don't underestimate going to Auburn late in November, too, with that Texas game around the corner. Right. I think Elko's a good enough coach to keep you there, but Auburn is still a dangerous place to go play.
Oh, sure.
Just want to say that.
Yeah. No, I look, if you I'll maintain my bet from the summer all the way through. I don't think an SEC team goes undefeated in conference play is what I was referring to. And right now they're sitting at 5-0 in league play. I don't think they run the gamut.
None of them are undefeated overall. And I mean, that went out the door.
But I meant conference play. Like
in conference, go 8-0.
I didn't think there was an SEC team that would go 8-0 this year. I stood by that. Now, I certainly didn't think A&M would be the last one standing, but I still think they drop a game before it's all said and done. They still might get to Atlanta with one loss, but I don't think they go 8-0. We shall see. No doubt about it, though. Mike Elko's done one hell of a job, and Marcel Reed is, like I said, he's a stick of dynamite. He is a lot of fun to watch. All right, we'll take our final.
Another redshirt freshman quarterback in the SEC.
That's right. We'll take our final timeout. We will get to Group 5 John, and we'll install an additional diving board and put on the trunks, a couple of quick deep dives before we say goodbye here on JC and Morgan. Mike here for our friends at MGNA Wealth. It's never a bad time to have someone on your side for all your financial needs. You need a trustworthy partner who has a true understanding of your situation in order to help you with smart and practical solutions. Since 1984, MGNA Wealth has helped their clients manage not just their wealth, but their lives. Today, as a nationally recognized wealth management firm, their team of pros remains dedicated to serving your best interests with an emphasis on personal attention and customized solutions. MGNA Wealth has clients all across the country, and they all get results. Don't put it off any longer. Call our friends at MGNA Wealth at 954-289-9000. That's 954-289-9000. MGAwealth.com is the website. They do more than manage wealth. They help manage lives.
Morning, Carl. Usual?
Yeah.
Your oldest was in here the other day. Said the two of you took a trip down to my neck of the woods. How'd that go?
You might as well give me one of those Carolina cars while you're at it.
I knew I liked that one.
Yeah.
There you go, my friend.
Thanks.
Hey, Carl. Congratulations.
See you tomorrow, ready?
You bet.
We're passionate about making sure that the Nest and Wild mattress is the best it can be. Made well and made right. Right here in Tupelo, Mississippi. So how can we do all that? Work. Hard work. And that means something. The Nest and Wild mattress is a movement. It's a pride in where you come from and where you're going. So get comfortable, because this movement is just beginning.
Here's JC and Morgan.
All right, back with you. Final segment of JC and Morgan, presented in part by Nest and Wild Mattress. NestandWild.com, the most comfortable mattress on the planet, and delivered to your door with an easy, just take it out of the box and you're ready to go. That's NestandWild.com, locally owned and operated by Brandon Jameson over there in Tupelo, Mississippi. All right, Group 5, John is at it. By the way, they complete under the radar. In 2026, UTEP is moving from CUSA to Mountain West. So you'll have to change all your UTEP, UCA, Conference USA gear if you have any. Take that patch off and get the Mountain West patch put on there. Okay, top 10 poll, Group 5 teams. Number 10, Western Michigan. Number 9, Western Kentucky. Number 8, James Madison. Curt Cignetti, his last team. By the way, Curt Cignetti, the only coach in college football history to have two different programs start a season 8-0. James Madison was 8-0 last year. Indiana is 8-0 this year. Take that to the water cooler. Number 7, Louisiana. Number 6, UNLV. Oh, the Fighting Barry Odoms lost to Boise State 29-24. Number 5, Memphis. Number 4, Navy. Navy's a tremendous story, but they were just overmatched against Notre Dame. 51-14, that game went final. Number 3, Tulane. They're 6-2, kind of flying under the radar. Number 2, Army. They've got Air Force, so if Army beats Air Force for the commander-in-chief, they'll be 8-0. And number 1, as we talked about at the top, Boise State. With that win now, they're 6-1. If they win out, and they've got San Diego State on Friday night, that's your Group 5 team. That continues. And Genty, another $128 against UNLV, 1376, 18 touchdowns for the year for the Broncos. And that is your G5 John top 10. Just a quick deep dive on two guys. We've mentioned Cignetti before. It's worth repeating. It's the best story in college football this year. 8-0 at Indiana. Where did this guy come from? And for those that are saying, why can't he be our coach? Well, he can, but Indiana's got money like every other Big Ten team's got money. He's 63. And to me, I'd rather have an experienced coach than some young, wet behind the ear whippersnapper. But that is going to scare off some teams. But to go back to the 80s, he was at Pitt, Davidson, Rice, Temple, Pitt, NC State, Bama for 3 years from 2007 to 2010 as a wide receiver coach. So that would have been Saban's first wide receiver coach.
He was on Saban's first staff, yeah.
First staff, yeah. Then IUP, Elon. These were the head coaching jobs. So he parlayed the Alabama assistant job into the IUP. What is that? Indiana, Pennsylvania?
Indiana University of Pennsylvania. My buddy John Gwart, who worked with at Rivals, was an IUP grad.
Okay.
It's a pretty good school. Yeah.
IUP John. He was there for 5 years, and he went to Elon for 2 years, and then, of course, JMU from 2019 to 2023. 4-3 in the Division II playoffs, 6-5 in the Division I playoffs, 1, 2, 3, 4 Coach of the Year awards in various conferences, And then he takes the Indiana job, and I'll be honest with you, when it happened, I was like, okay, big deal. We won't hear from him again because he's going to Indiana, and that is the abyss. And that he might be a fine coach, but not happening. And now he's 8-0. Again, a great story, Curt Cignetti. I will vote for the Bear Bryant Award, Coach of the Year. Right now, I can't imagine him not being the guy. Another guy is Cade Bell. And I made the mistake, JC, when we got off the air last week and we did the boss. I forgot to mention Pitt and what a great story they've been. Well, a big part of that is Cade Bell, their offensive coordinator. Now, Cade is a former quarterback in college at Jacksonville and then coached at Valdosta State, South Florida, Tusculum, Western Carolina, and Pitt is obviously the latest job. So they plucked him away from Cullowhee as the OC at Western Carolina. And I didn't even realize he's the son of Kerwin Bell, the former Florida quarterback who actually fared quite well in the 80s. And Kerwin's gone on to a very good coaching career.
Yeah, he's at Western.
Bell at Western, correct. Cade Bell has been a huge part of why they've turned it around.
I think Kerwin won a national championship at Valdosta State, and I didn't know this. It was the first national championship they'd ever won. I thought they had won one before, and my brain may be misfiring because I'm still processing that virtual reality loss by the Bears yesterday. But it's, I'll tell you this. I watched just about the whole NC State Western Carolina game, and that was kind of the beginning of cracks in the armor for Dave Dorn this year.
Yeah.
And they had Billy Gonzalez's kid. Billy's a receivers coach at Florida, I think, was there under Urban Meyer. Good guy, good recruiter at quarterback. And they were dicing them up. And that's when I watched it, Mike, that's the closest. And I know Kerwin and Steve Spurrier are buddies because Kerwin used to coach high school ball down there. I mean, he didn't play for Spurrier, but he coached for him, and he runs his offense. That's the closest that because the only guy that can run Spurrier's offense is Spurrier most of the time because it's his. He made it up. He knows the terms, all that. That's the closest I think anybody's ever come to executing that thing because it's the same play, same concept. They look like the Gators out there throwing the ball around. And so Cade, it does not surprise me. And I haven't gotten into Pitt to where I've looked and seen if there's similarities there or not, but I'm sure there is. And I'm not surprised at all. This guy's a rising star coordinator. Not at all. And Pat Narduzzi, these people talking about him being on the hot seat because he had a bad year last year are just complete imbeciles. Because, he's on 3-8 and he's at Pitt and oh my God. Blah, blah. Dude, okay, he had a bad year. So what? He lost a bunch of guys out of the portal, got a bunch of guys in there, made the right hire on offense again. He's done it more than once. Some defensive guys can't hire an offensive coordinator. He's hired like 5 of them that are really good. And Pat Narduzzi does not give a flip if he beats you 48-47 or 7-6. He's that good, and Pitt has come back to life a bit under him. And this was a fantastic hire. Not a soul talked about, Yeah. I probably would have talked about it had I known a little bit more, but I'm sorry I didn't. Sorry, Phil, if you're still listening, because he went to Western Carolina. I didn't research the Catamounts. Didn't really even know Kerwin was there until I saw the game this year.
Western? He's a Catamount?
Yeah, Phil went to Western Carolina University.
I did not know that. So I've been to Cullowhee to broadcast a game once. Beautiful mountain town. Of course, they got pummeled by the hurricane. Hopefully all those dollars coming in at the country concert in Charlotte will help.
Yeah, I knew about Western Carolina early because when I was a kid, they were cannon fodder for Clemson and South Carolina both. Yeah. Like both teams would play Western Carolina just about every year. And remember their helmets said the Cats on the side of them. The Cats. I thought that was kind of interesting in the 80s.
Well, anyway, Cade Bell, he's been a terrific story. And when I first heard that name, I didn't even put 2 and 2 together. I'll be honest, that he was the son of Kerwin Bell, by the way. I remember watching him in the World League. Remember when that was a thing before the XFL and the UFL and the blah, blah, blah. He was, I think, like the Orlando Thunder or something. But For those who think Florida football did nothing before Spurrier, they were 9-1-1 and SEC champions in '84, and the SEC commissioners had a vote on rules violations, and they voted 5-4 to take away the title. So when Spurrier was there, they actually had first in the SEC written in the swamp, 1984, to honor that team. And then some people were like, well, maybe that's not a good idea. But Curran was a hell of a player, and now his son is doing a hell of a job as a assistant coach. So Bell and Cignetti, two guys. Cignetti's not under the radar anymore. Everybody's still talking about him, but a lot of people don't know, like, where did he come from? And they think he's like he's a young looking guy. He was on game day. He looks like he's like 40. He's got energy, and he's
to be 63. He looks fantastic.
He looks fantastic. Like, we've seen coaching. You age in like cat years when you're a college football coach. Not this dude.
Mike Elko is 20 years younger than Curt Cignetti.
Yes, you wouldn't know it. You would know it. I mean, I don't know. Is he got a Botox guy? Like, what's going on there? But he looks fantastic. 63, and Indiana's really lucky to have him. We're lucky to have you folks out there. Always appreciate hearing from you on Chat Row and tuning us in each and every week. And like I said, we've got some other things coming down the pike. Any final well wishes, JC, before we sign off?
I just wish everybody a good week, a good weekend of college football. And, I'm just going to – I don't want there to be this Ryan Day debate that we have on the show not that we're debating, but talking about it all the time, because it's going to come up. So it's all the same to me if Ohio State wins. But at some point, for the sake of Penn State fans, even if you don't like James Franklin, you hope they break through against the Buckeyes or Michigan, when Michigan's good. I think they beat Michigan by 3 touchdowns right now. But, you just hope that they can finally, you never win the big one. You got to win the big one. And they did beat Ohio State that one year. Remember when Penn State actually won the Big Ten, and Ohio State actually went to the playoff. Yeah. And it was weird. So
I'm with you. I think Penn State, they deserve a game like this and a win like this. That fan base has been through a lot, as we all know, a decade or so ago. And the NCAA decided to punish everybody that had nothing involved with that whole situation, and tried to. It's the closest thing to the death penalty we've ever had.
That was ridiculous.
It was ridiculous. You didn't punish the people that were responsible. You punished all the people going forward. 10, 15, 30 years later, after all the incidents happened. So they have gotten back on their feet. Bill O'Brien was a big reason for that. He's the guy that took the job first after that whole debacle. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that game. That's going to be primo. We talked about the South Carolina Texas A&M game. I think A&M is like a 3.5 point favorite. That's going to be ABC Saturday night. That's going to be unbelievable at Williams-Brice Stadium. Florida, Georgia used to be a really competitive game. I don't know what it's going to look like on Saturday.
Hey, don't be surprised if that thing's close. Yeah, at least for a half. I mean, it has been the last couple of years competitive. Napier's teams have played well early in that one, and don't be surprised just because of the nature of things. Don't be surprised.
I mean, I wouldn't. And Georgia at times, again, Carson Beck has been a little bit hot and cold, but that defense is still downright nasty. So there are some good games and some hidden gems on the slate, and we'll talk about those and more next week on another installment of JC and Morgan. Our thanks again to Mad Dog Phil and everybody for tuning in. We'll see you next time.